All right, we are hitting 8 o'clock, and we are ready to get settled in. Welcome back, everyone, to our second reading from Lewis Carroll's classic children's story, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. Um, Yesterday we got through a little bit more than half, so I fully expect us to finish tonight. We've seen our introduction to the cast of characters. We've seen our airheaded protagonist kind of bumble her way through Wonderland. The waking dream that is full of wonder and whimsy. And she's honestly kind of a typical child in a lot of ways. Um, Unthinking, uncaring, unaware of consequences. But such is how things are. They tend to play out that way, and we just kind of have to sit back and watch the antics unfold. So, let's go ahead and get back into it. We have another night of fantasy and whimsy ahead of us, where we'll finish this book, and then we'll have a little bit of time to chat, because I think we'll finish a fair bit before the end time tonight. So we can either reflect on it, or, as honestly, there's not a whole lot to really deep thought involved with this one to really warrant a ton of discussion. We can think about talking about what we'll read next when we come to the end of the night. And yeah, kids aren't exactly known for being thoughtful. She's a little bit more schizo than many children, having been admitted to her through the book or through the narration that she enjoys pretending to be two people at once. It makes for an interesting internal monologue. That's certainly. I guess if you're pretending to be two people at once, is it an internal monologue or a dialogue? Deep thoughts for a shallow pool. Alright, well, let's just get back into it. We are resuming tonight with Chapter 9 of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, The Mock Turtle's Story. Oh man, I have to remember how I did all the voices last time. There's so many of them. "You can't think how glad I am to see you again, you dear old thing," said the Duchess, as she tucked her arm affectionately into Alice's, and they walked off together. Alice was very glad to find her in such a pleasant temper, and thought to herself that perhaps it was only the pepper that had made her so savage when they met in the kitchen. "When I'm a duchess," she said to herself, not in a very hopeful tone, though, "I won't have any pepper in my kitchen at all. Soup does very well without. Maybe it's always pepper that makes people hot-tempered." She went on, very much pleased at having found out a new kind of rule, and vinegar that makes them sour, and chamomile that makes them bitter, and barley sugar, and such things that make children sweet-tempered. I could only wish people knew that. Then they wouldn't be so stingy about it, you know. She had quite forgotten the Duchess by this time, and was a little startled when she heard her voice close to her ear. "You're thinking about something, my dear, and that makes you forget to talk. I can't tell you just now what the moral of that is, but I shall remember it in a bit." "Perhaps it isn't one," Alice ventured to remark. "Tut, tut, child," said the Duchess. "Everything's got a moral, if only you can find it." And she squeezed herself up closer to Alice's side as she spoke. Alice did not much like keeping so close to her. First, because the Duchess was very ugly, and secondly, because she was exactly the right height to rest her chin upon Alice's shoulder, and it was an uncomfortably sharp chin. However, she did not like to be rude, so she bore it as well as she could. "The game's going on rather better now," she said, by way of keeping up the conversation a little. "'Tis so," said the Duchess. "And the moral of that is, oh, 'tis love that makes the world go round." "Somebody said," Alice whispered, "that it's done by everybody minding their own business." "Ah, well, it means much the same thing," said the Duchess, digging her sharp little chin into Alice's shoulder as she added, "and the moral of that is, take care of the sense, and the sounds will take care of themselves." How fond she is of finding morals in things, Alice thought to herself. "I dare say you're wondering why I don't put my arm round your waist," the Duchess said after a pause. "The reason is that I'm doubtful about the temper of your flamingo. Shall I try the experiment?" "He might bite," Alice cautiously replied, not feeling at all anxious to have the experiment tried. "Very true," said the Duchess. "Flamingos and mustard both bite, and the moral of that is, birds of a feather flock together." "Only mustard isn't a bird," Alice remarked. "Right, as usual," said the Duchess. "What a clear way you have of putting things." "It's a mineral, I think," said Alice. "Of course it is," said the Duchess, who seemed ready to agree to everything that Alice said. "There's a large mustard mine near here, and the moral of that is, the more there is of mine, the less there is of yours." "Oh, I know!" exclaimed Alice, who had not attended to this last remark. "It's a vegetable. It doesn't look like one, but it is." "I quite agree with you," said the Duchess, "and the moral of that is, be what you would seem to be. Or if you'd like to put it more simply, Never imagine yourself to not be otherwise than what it might appear to others, that what you were or might have been was not otherwise than what you had been would have appeared to them to be otherwise. I think I should understand that better, said Alice very politely, if I had it written down, but I can't quite follow it as you say it. There's nothing to what I could say if I chose, the Duchess replied, in a pleased tone. Pray, don't trouble yourself to say it any longer than that, said Alice. Oh, don't talk about trouble, said the Duchess. I make you a present of everything I've said as yet. A cheap sort of present, thought Alice. I'm glad they don't give birthday presents like that. But she did not venture to say it aloud. Thinking again? The Duchess asked, with another dig of her sharp little chin. I've a right to think, said Alice sharply, for she was beginning to feel a little worried. Just about as much right, said the Duchess, as pigs have to fly, and the... But here, to Alice's great surprise, the Duchess's voice died away, even in the middle of her favorite word, moral, and the arm that was linked into hers began to tremble. Alice looked up, and there stood the Queen in front of them, with her arms folded, frowning like a thunderstorm. A fine day, Your Majesty, the Duchess began in a low, weak voice. Now, I give you a fair warning, shouted the Queen, stamping on the ground as she spoke. Either you or your head must be off, and that in about half no time. Take your choice. The Duchess took her choice and was gone in a moment. Let's go on with the game, the Queen said to Alice, and Alice was too much frightened to say a word, but slowly followed her back to the croquet ground. The other guests had taken advantage of the Queen's absence, and were resting in the shade. However, the moment they saw her, they hurried back to the game, the Queen merely remarking that a moment's delay would cost them their lives. All the time they were playing, the Queen never left off quarreling with the other players, and shouting, "Off with his head!" or "Off with her head!" Those whom she sentenced were taken into custody by the soldiers, who of course had to leave off being arches to do this, so that by the end of half an hour or so there were no arches left, and all the players except the King, the Queen, and Alice were in custody and under sentence of execution. Then the Queen left off, quite out of breath, and said to Alice, "Have you seen the Mock Turtle yet?" No, said Alice. I don't even know what a Mock Turtle is. It's the thing Mock Turtle soup is made from, said the Queen. I never saw one, or heard of one, said Alice. Come on, then, said the Queen, and he shall tell you his story. As they walked off together, Alice heard the King say in a low voice to the company generally, "You are all pardoned." Come, that's a good thing, she said to herself, for she had felt quite unhappy at the number of executions the Queen had ordered. They very soon came upon a griffin, lying fast asleep in the sun. If you don't know what a griffin is, look at the picture. "Up, lazy thing," said the Queen, "and take this young lady to see the Mock Turtle. And hear his history. I must go back and see after some executions I have ordered." And she walked off, leaving Alice alone with the griffin. Alice did not quite like the look of the creature, but on the whole she thought it would be quite safe to stay with it as to go after that savage Queen, so she waited. The griffin sat up and rubbed its eyes. Then it watched the Queen till she was out of sight. Then it chuckled. "What fun!" said the griffin, half to itself, half to Alice. "What is the fun?" said Alice. "Why, she," said the griffin. "It's all her fancy, that. They never executes nobody, you know. Come on." Everybody says, "Come on," here, thought Alice, as she went slowly after it. I never was so ordered about in all my life. Never! They had not gone far before they saw the Mock Turtle in the distance, sitting sad and lonely on a little ledge of rock, and as they came nearer, Alice could hear him sighing as if his heart would break. She pitied him deeply. "What is his sorrow?" she asked the griffin, and the griffin answered very nearly in the same words as before, "It's all his fancy, that. He hasn't got no sorrow, you know. Come on." So they went up to the Mock Turtle, who looked at them with large eyes full of tears, but said nothing. "This here young lady," said the Gryphon, "she wants for to know your history, she do." "I'll tell her," said the Mock Turtle in a deep, hollow tone. "Sit down, both of you, and don't speak a word till I've finished." So they sat down, and nobody spoke for some minutes. Alice thought to herself, "I don't see how he can ever finish if he doesn't begin." But she waited patiently. "Once," said the Mock Turtle at last, with a deep sigh, "I was a real turtle." These words were followed by a very long silence, broken only by an occasional exclamation of from the Gryphon, and the constant, heavy sobbing of the Mock Turtle. Alice was very nearly getting up and saying, "Thank you, sir, for your interesting story." But she could not help but thinking there must be more to come, so she sat still and said nothing. "When we were little," the Mock Turtle went on at last, more calmly, though still sobbing a little now and then, "we went to school in the sea. The master was an old turtle. We used to call him Tortoise." "Why do you call him Tortoise, if he wasn't one?" Alice asked. "We called him Tortoise because he taught us," said the Mock Turtle angrily. "Really, you are very dull." "You ought to be ashamed of yourself for asking such a simple question," added the Gryphon, and then they both sat silent and looked at poor Alice, who felt ready to sink into the earth. At last the Gryphon said to the Mock Turtle, "Drive on, old fellow, don't be all day about it." And he went on in these words: "Yes, we went to school in the sea, though you mayn't believe it." "I never said I didn't," interrupted Alice. "You did," said the Mock Turtle. "Hold your tongue," added the Gryphon, before Alice could speak again. The Mock Turtle went on: "We had the best of educations. In fact, we went to school every day." "I've been to school every day, too," said Alice. "You needn't be so proud as all that." "With extras?" asked the Mock Turtle a little anxiously. "Yes," said Alice. "We learned French and music." "And washing?" said the Mock Turtle. "Certainly not," said Alice indignantly. "Ah, then yours wasn't really a good school," said the Mock Turtle in a tone of great relief. "Now, at ours, they had at the end of the bill French, music, and washing extra." "You couldn't have wanted it much," said Alice, "living at the bottom of the sea." "I couldn't afford to learn it," said the Mock Turtle with a sigh. "I only took the regular course." "What was that?" inquired Alice. "Reeling and writhing, of course, to begin with," the Mock Turtle replied, "and then the different branches of arithmetic: ambition, distraction, uglification, and derision." "I never heard of uglification," Alice ventured to say. "What is it?" The Gryphon lifted up both its paws in surprise. "What! Never heard of uglifying?" it exclaimed. "You know what to beautify is, I suppose." "Yes," said Alice doubtfully. "It means to make anything prettier." "Well then," the Gryphon went on, "if you don't know what to uglify is, you are a simpleton." Alice did not feel encouraged to ask any more questions about it, so she turned to the Mock Turtle and said, "What else did you learn?" "Well, there was mystery," the Mock Turtle replied, counting off the subjects on his flippers. "Mystery, ancient and modern, with seaography, then drawling. The drawling master was an old conger eel that used to come once a week. He taught us drawling, stretching, and fainting in coils." "What was that like?" said Alice. "Well, I can't show it you myself," the Mock Turtle said. "I'm too stiff, and the Gryphon never learnt it." "Hadn't time," said the Gryphon. "I went to the classics master, though. He was an old crab, he was." "I never went to him," the Mock Turtle said with a sigh. "He taught laughing and grief, they used to say." So he did," said the Gryphon, sighing in his turn, and both creatures hid their faces in their paws. "And how many hours a day did you do lessons?" said Alice, in a hurry to change the subject. 10 hours the first day," said the Mock Turtle, 9 the next, and so on. "What a curious plan!" exclaimed Alice. "That's the reason they're called lessons," the Gryphon remarked, "because they lessen from day to day." That was quite a new idea to Alice, and she thought it over a little before she made her next remark. Then, the 11th day must have been a holiday? Of course it was, said the Mock Turtle. And how did you manage on the 12th? Alice went on eagerly. That's enough about lessons, the Gryphon interrupted in a very decided tone. Tell her something about the games now. And that brings us to the end of Chapter 9. Yeah, the Mock Turtle seems like a fun sort. A little bit of channeling a little bit of Eeyore through that one, I think. All right. So we come now to Chapter 10, The Lobster Quadrille. The Mock Turtle sighed deeply and drew back drew the back of one flapper across his eyes. He looked at Alice and tried to speak, but for a minute or two sobs choked his voice. Same as if he had a bone in his throat, said the Gryphon, and it set to work shaking him and punching him on the back. At last the Mock Turtle recovered his voice, and with tears running down his cheeks he went on again. You may not have lived much under the sea. I haven't, said Alice, and perhaps you were never even introduced to a lobster. Alice began to say, I once tasted, but checked herself hastily and said, no, never. So you can have no idea what a delightful thing a lobster quadrille is. No, indeed, said Alice. What sort of a dance is it? Why, said the Gryphon, you first form into a line along the seashore. 2 lines, cried the Mock Turtle. Seals, turtles, salmon, and so on. Then, when you've cleared all the jellyfish out of the way, that generally takes some time, interrupted the Gryphon. You advance twice, each with a lobster as a partner, cried the Gryphon. Of course, the Mock Turtle said. Advance twice, set to partners. Change lobsters and retire in same order, continued the Gryphon. Then, you know, the Mock Turtle went on, you throw the lobsters, shouted the Gryphon, with a bound into the air, as far out to sea as you can. Swim after them, screamed the Gryphon. Turn a somersault in the sea, cried the Mock Turtle, capering wildly about. Change lobsters again, yelled the Gryphon at the top of his voice. Back to land again, and that's all the first figure, said the Mock Turtle, suddenly dropping his voice, and the 2 creatures, who had been jumping about like mad things all this time, sat down again, very sadly and quietly, and looked at Alice. It must be a very pretty dance, said Alice timidly. Would you like to see a little of it? Said the Mock Turtle. Very much indeed, said Alice. Come, let's try the first figure, said the Mock Turtle to the Gryphon. We can do without lobsters, you know. Which shall sing? Oh, you sing, said the Gryphon. I've forgotten the words. So they began, solemnly dancing around and round Alice, every now and then treading on her toes when they passed too close, and waving their forepaws to mark the time, while the Mock Turtle sang this very slowly and sadly. Will you walk a little faster, said a whiting to a snail. There's a porpoise close behind us, and he's treading on my tail. How eagerly the lobsters and the turtles all advance. They are waiting on the shingle. Will you come and join the dance? Will you, won't you, will you, won't you, will you join the dance? Will you, won't you, will you, won't you join the dance? You really have no notion how delightful it will be when they take us up and throw us with the lobsters out to sea. But the snail replied, too far, and gave a look askance. Said he thanked the whiting kindly, but he would not join the dance. Would not, could not, would not, could not, would not join the dance. Would not, could not, would not, could not, could not join the dance. What matters it how far we go? His scaly friend replied. There is another shore, you know, upon the other side. The farther off from England, the nearer is to France. Then turn not pale, beloved snail, but come and join the dance. Will you, won't you, will you, won't you join the dance? Will you, won't you, will you, won't you join the dance? Thank you, it's a very interesting dance to watch, said Alice, feeling very glad that it was over at last. and I do so like that curious song about the whiting." "Oh, as to the whiting," said the Mock Turtle, you've seen them, of course." "Yes," said Alice, "I've often seen them at She checked herself hastily. "I don't know where Din may be," said the Mock Turtle, "but if you've seen them so often, of course you know what they're like." "I believe so," Alice replied thoughtfully. "They have their tails in their mouths, and they're all over crumbs." "You're wrong about the crumbs," said the Mock Turtle. "Crumbs would all wash off in the sea, but they have their tails in the mouths. And the reason is—" Here the Mock Turtle yawned and shut his eyes. "Tell her about the reason and all that," he said to the Griffin. "The reason is," said the Griffin, "that they would go with the lobsters to the dance. So they got thrown out to sea, so they had to fall a long way. So they got their tails fast in their mouths, so they couldn't get them out again. That's all." "Thank you," said Alice. "It's very interesting. I never knew so much about a whiting before." "I can tell you more than that, if you like," said the Griffin. "Do you know why it's called a whiting?" "I never thought to ask about it," said Alice. "Why?" "It does the boots and shoes," the Griffin replied very solemnly. Alice was thoroughly puzzled. "Does the boots and shoes?" she repeated in a wondering tone. "Why, what are your shoes done with?" said the Griffin. "I mean, what makes them so shiny?" Alice looked down at them and considered a little before she gave her answers. "They're done with blacking, I believe." "Boots and shoes under the sea," the Griffin went on in a deep voice, "are done with a whiting. Now you know." "And what are they made of?" Alice asked in a tone of great curiosity. "Soles and eels, of course," the Griffin replied rather impatiently. "Any shrimp could have told you that." "If I'd been the whiting," said Alice, whose thoughts were still running on the song, "I'd have said to the porpoise, 'Keep back, please. We don't want you with us.'" "They were obliged to have him with them," the Mock Turtle said. "No wise fish would go anywhere without a porpoise." Wouldn't it really?" said Alice in a tone of great surprise. "Of course not," said the Mock Turtle. "Why, if a fish came to me and told me he was going on a journey, I should say, 'With what porpoise?'" "Don't you mean purpose?" said Alice. "I mean what I say," the Mock Turtle replied in an offended tone, and the Griffin added, "Come, let's hear some of your adventures." "I could tell you my adventures, beginning from this morning," said Alice a little timidly, "but it's no use going back to yesterday, because I was a different person then." "Explain all that," said the Mock Turtle. No, the adventures first," said the Griffin in an impatient tone. "Explanations take such a dreadful time." So Alice began telling them her adventures from the time when she first saw the White Rabbit. She was a little nervous about it just at first. The two creatures got so close to her, one on each side, and opened their eyes and mouths so very wide. But she gained courage as she went on. Her listeners were perfectly quiet till she got to the part about her repeating, "You are old, Father William," to the caterpillar, and the words all coming different, and then the Mock Turtle drew a long breath and said, "That's very curious." "It's all about as curious as it can be," said the Griffin. "It all came different," the Mock Turtle repeated thoughtfully. "I should like to hear her try and repeat something now. Tell her to begin." He looked at the Griffin as if he thought it had some kind of authority over Alice. "Stand up and repeat 'Tis the voice of the sluggard,'" said the Griffin. "How the creatures order one about and make one repeat lessons," thought Alice. "I might as well be at school at once." However, she got up and began to repeat it, but her head was so full of the lobster quadrille that she hardly knew what she was saying, and the words came very queer indeed. "'Tis the voice of the lobster," I heard him declare. "You have baked me too brown, I must sugar my hair. As a duck with its eyelids, so he with his nose trims his belt and his buttons and turns out his toes." Later editions continued as follows. "When the sands are all dry, he is gay as a lark, and will talk in contemptuous tones of the shark. But when the tide rises and sharks are around, his voice has a timid and tremulous sound." That's different from what I used to say when I was a child, said the Gryphon. Well, I never heard it before, said the Mock Turtle, but it sounds uncommon nonsense. Alice said nothing. She sat down with her face in her hands, wondering if anything would ever happen in a natural way again. I should like to have it explained, said the Mock Turtle. She can't explain it, said the Gryphon hastily. Go on with the next verse. But what about his toes? The Mock Turtle persisted. How could he turn them out with his nose, you know? It's the first position in dancing, Alice said, but was dreadfully puzzled by the whole thing, and longed to change the subject. Go on with the next verse, the Gryphon repeated impatiently. It begins, I passed by his garden. Alice did not dare to disobey, though she felt sure it would all come wrong, and she went on in a trembling voice. I passed by his garden, and marked with one eye how the owl and the panther were sharing a pie. Later editions continued as follows. The panther took pie crust and gravy and meat, while the owl had the dish as its share of the treat. When the pie was all finished, the owl, as a boon, was kindly permitted to pocket the spoon, while the panther received knife and fork with a growl, and concluded the banquet. What is the use of repeating all that stuff? The Mock Turtle interrupted. If you don't explain it as you go on, it's by far the most confusing thing I ever heard. Yes, I think you'd better leave off, said the Gryphon, and Alice was only too glad to do so. Shall we try another figure of the lobster quadrille? The Gryphon went on. Or would you like the Mock Turtle to sing you a song? Oh, a song, please, if the Mock Turtle would be so kind. Alice replied, so eagerly that the Gryphon said in a rather offended tone, Huh, no accounting for tastes. Sing her turtle soup, will you, old fellow? The Mock Turtle sighed deeply, and began in a voice sometimes choked with sobs to sing this. Beautiful soup, so rich and green, waiting in a hot tureen. Who for such dainties would not stoop? Soup of the evening, beautiful soup. Soup of the evening, beautiful soup. Beautiful soup, beautiful soup. Soup of the evening, beautiful, beautiful soup. Beautiful soup, who cares for fish, game, or any other dish? Who would not give all else for two? Pennyworth only of beautiful soup. Pennyworth only of beautiful soup. Beautiful soup, beautiful soup. Soup of the evening, beautiful, beautiful soup. Chorus again, cried the Gryphon, and the Mock Turtle had just begun to repeat it, when a cry of, The trial's beginning! Was heard in the distance. Come on, cried the Gryphon, and taking Alice by the hand, it hurried off, without waiting for the end of the song. What trial is it? Alice panted as she ran, but the Gryphon only answered, Come on, and ran the faster, while more and more faintly came, carried on the breeze that followed them, the melancholy words, Soup of the evening, beautiful, beautiful soup. That brings us to the end of chapter 10. Well, that was a fun one. And yeah, as you mentioned, that one was fun. That part was fun. There were a lot of puns back and forth and wordplay going on that were, purpose and porpoise and whiting and blackening and all the fun things. All right. Let's carry on now. We've got chapter 11. Who Stole the Tarts? The King and Queen of Hearts were seated on their throne when they arrived, with a great crowd assembled about them. All sorts of little birds and beasts, as well as the whole pack of cards. The knave was standing before them in chains, with a soldier on each side to guard him. And near the king was the White Rabbit, with a trumpet in one hand and a scroll of parchment in the other. In the very middle of the court was a table, with a large dish of tarts upon it. They looked so good that it made Alice quite hungry to look at them. I wish they'd get the trial done, she thought, and hand round the refreshments. But there seemed to be no chance of this, so she began looking at everything about her to pass away the time.
Alice had never been in a court of justice before, but she had read about them in books, and she was quite pleased to find that she knew the name of nearly everything there. "That's the judge," she said to herself, because of his great wig. The judge, by the way, was the king, as he wore his crown over the wig. Look at the frontispiece if you want to see how he did it. I guess that's the cover for the book. He did not look at all comfortable, and it was certainly not becoming. "And that's the jury box," thought Alice, "and those 12 creatures." She was obliged to say creatures, you see, because some of them were animals and some were birds. "I suppose they are the jurors." She said this last word 2 or 3 times over to herself, being rather proud of it, for she thought, and rightly too, that very few little girls of her age knew the meaning of it at all. However, jurymen would have done just as well. The 12 jurors were all writing busily on slates. "What are they doing?" Alice whispered to the Griffin. "They can't have anything to put down yet, before the trial's begun." "They're putting down their names," the Griffin whispered in reply, "for fear they should forget them before the end of the trial." "Stupid things!" Alice began in a loud, indignant voice. But she stopped hastily, for the White Rabbit cried out, "Silence in the court!" And the king put on his spectacles and looked anxiously around to make out who was talking. Alice could see, as well as if she were looking over their shoulders, that all the jurors were writing down stupid things on their slates, and she could even make out that one of them didn't know how to spell stupid, and that he had to ask his neighbor to tell him. "A nice muddle their slates will be in before the trial's over," thought Alice. One of the jurors had a pencil that squeaked. This, of course, Alice could not stand, and so she went round the court and got behind him, and very soon found an opportunity of taking it away. She did it so quickly that the poor little juror, it was Bill the lizard, could not make out at all what had become of it. So, after hunting all around for it, he was obliged to write with one finger for the rest of the day, and this was of very little use, as it left no mark on the slate. "Herald, read the accusation," said the king. On this the White Rabbit blew 3 blasts on the trumpet, and then unrolled the parchment scroll, and read as follows. "The Queen of Hearts she made some tarts, all on a summer day. The Knave of Hearts, he stole those tarts, and took them quite away." "Consider your verdict," the king said to the jury. "Not yet, not yet," the rabbit hastily interrupted. "There's a great deal to come before that." "Call the first witness," said the king, and the White Rabbit blew 3 blasts on the trumpet, and called out, "First witness!" The first witness was the Hatter. He came in with a teacup in one hand and a piece of bread and butter in the other. "I beg your pardon, your majesty," he began, "for bringing these in, but I hadn't quite finished my tea when I was sent for." "You ought to have finished," said the king. "When did you begin?" The Hatter looked at the March Hare, who had followed him into the court, arm in arm with the Dormouse. 14th of March, I think it was," he said. 15th, said the March Hare. 16th, said the Dormouse. "Write that down," the king said to the jury, and the jury eagerly wrote down all 3 dates on their slates, and then added them up and reduced the answer to shillings and pence. "Take off your hat," the king said to the Hatter. "It isn't mine," said the Hatter. "Stolen!" the king exclaimed, returning to the jury, who instantly made a memorandum of the fact. "I keep them to sell," the Hatter added as an explanation. "I've none of my own. I'm a Hatter." Here the queen put on her spectacles and began staring at the Hatter, who turned pale and fidgeted. "Give your evidence," said the king, "and don't be nervous, or I'll have you executed on the spot." This did not seem to encourage the witness at all. He kept shifting from one foot to the other, looking uneasily at the queen, and in his confusion he bit a large piece out of his teacup instead of the bread and butter. Just at this moment Alice felt a very curious sensation, which puzzled her a good deal until she made out what it was. She was beginning to grow larger again, and she thought at first she would get up and leave the court, but on second thought she decided to remain where she was, as long as there was room for her. "I wish you wouldn't squeeze so," said the Dormouse, who was sitting next to her. "I can hardly breathe." "I can't help it," Alice said very meekly. "I'm growing." "You've no right to grow here," said the Dormouse. Don't talk nonsense, Alice said more boldly. You know you're growing too. Yes, but I grow at a reasonable pace, said the Dormouse, not in that ridiculous fashion. And he got up very sulkily and crossed over to the other side of the court. All this time the Queen had never left off staring at the Hatter, and just as the Dormouse crossed the court, she said to one of the officers of the court, "Bring me the list of the singers in the last concert," on which the wretched Hatter trembled so that he shook both his shoes off. "Give your evidence," the King repeated angrily, "or I'll have you executed, whether you're nervous or not." "I'm a poor man, Your Majesty," the Hatter began in a trembling voice, "and I hadn't begun my tea, not above a week or so. And what with the bread and butter getting so thin, and the twinkling of the tea—" "The twinkling of the what?" said the King. "It began with the tea," the Hatter replied. "Of course, twinkling begins with a T," said the King sharply. "Do you take me for a dunce? Go on." "I'm a poor man," the Hatter went on, "and most things twinkled after that. Only the March Hare said—" "I didn't!" the March Hare interrupted in a great hurry. "You did!" said the Hatter. "I deny it!" said the March Hare. "He denies it!" said the King. "Leave out that part." "Well, at any rate, the Dormouse said," the Hatter went on, looking anxiously round to see if he would deny it too. But the Dormouse denied nothing, being fast asleep. "After that," continued the Hatter, "I cut some more bread and butter." "But what did the Dormouse say?" one of the jury asked. "That I can't remember." "You must remember," remarked the King, "or I'll have you executed." The miserable Hatter dropped his teacup and bread and butter and went down on one knee. "I'm a poor man, Your Majesty," he began. "You're a very poor speaker," said the King. Here one of the guinea pigs cheered, and was immediately suppressed by the officers of the court. As that is rather a hard word, I will just explain to you how it was done. They had a large canvas bag, which tied up at the mouth with strings. Into this they slipped the guinea pig head first, and then sat upon it. That sounds just as harsh as suppressed. "I'm glad I've seen that done," thought Alice. "I've so often read in the newspaper at the end of trials there were some attempts at applause, which was immediately suppressed by the officers of the court, and I never understood what it meant till now." "If that's all you know about it, you may stand down," continued the King. "I can't go no lower," said the Hatter. "I'm on the floor as it is." "Then you may sit down," the King replied. Here the other guinea pig cheered and was suppressed. "Come, that finished the guinea pigs," thought Alice. "Now we shall get on better." "I'd rather finish my tea," said the Hatter, with an anxious look at the Queen, who was reading the list of singers. "You may go," said the King, and the Hatter hurriedly left the court, without even waiting to put his shoes on. "And just take his head off outside," the Queen added to one of the officers, but the Hatter was out of sight before the officer could get to the door. "Call the next witness," said the King. The next witness was the Duchess's cook. She carried the pepper box in her hand, and Alice guessed who it was, even before she got into the court, by the way the people near the door began sneezing all at once. "Give your evidence." "Shan't," said the cook. The King looked anxiously at the White Rabbit, who said in a low voice, "Your Majesty must cross-examine this witness." "Well, if I must, I must," the King said, with a melancholy air, and after folding his arms and frowning at the cook till his eyes were nearly out of sight, he said in a deep voice, "What are tarts made of?" "Pepper, mostly," said the cook. "Treacle," said a sleepy voice behind her. "Collar that dormouse!" the Queen shrieked out. "Behead that dormouse! Turn that dormouse out of court! Suppress him! Punch him off with his whiskers!" For some minutes the whole court was in confusion, getting the dormouse turned out, and by the time they had settled down again, the cook had disappeared. "Never mind," said the King with an air of great relief. "Call the next witness." And he added in an undertone to the Queen, "Really, my dear, you must cross-examine the next witness. It makes my forehead ache." Alice watched the White Rabbit as he fumbled over the list, feeling very curious to see what the next witness would be like, for they hadn't got much evidence yet. She said to herself, Imagine her surprise when the White Rabbit read out at the top of his shrill little voice the name Alice! And that brings us to the end of chapter 11. That was a fun one. The court with the different characters coming out and about and having their own obviously absurd quirks. All right. So we've got a couple chapters left. We're coming up on 12. Oh, actually, I think this next is the last chapter already. Wow, really? Oh, wow, it's short. So we'll probably finish before break time tonight, actually. So let's just go ahead and power through and get this last chapter out of the way, and we'll chat and yap a little bit and call it an early night, I think. And so we continue with the last chapter of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. Chapter 12, Alice's Evidence. "Here!" cried Alice, quite forgetting in the flurry of the moment how large she had grown in the last few minutes. And she jumped up in such a hurry that she tipped over the jury box with the edge of her skirt, upsetting all the jurymen onto the heads of the crowd below, where they lay sprawling about, reminding her very much of a globe of goldfish she had accidentally upset the week before. "Oh, I beg your pardon," she exclaimed in a tone of great dismay, and began picking them up again as quickly as she could, for the accident of the goldfish kept running in her head, and she had a vague sort of idea that they must be collected at once and put back into the jury box or they would die. "The trial cannot proceed," said the king in a very grave voice, "until all the jurymen are back in their proper places. All," he repeated with great emphasis, looking hard at Alice as he said so. Alice looked at the jury box and saw that, in her haste, she had put the lizard in, head downwards, and the poor little thing was waving its tail about in a melancholy way, being quite unable to move. She soon got it out again and put it right. "Not that it signifies much," she said to herself. "I should think it would be quite as much use in the trial one way up as the other." As soon as the jury had a little recovered from the shock of being upset, and their slates and pencils had been found and handed back to them, they set to work very diligently to write out a history of the accident, all except the lizard, who had seemed too much overcome to do anything but sit with its mouth open, gazing up into the roof of the court. "What do you know about this business?" the king said to Alice. "Nothing," said Alice. "Nothing whatever?" persisted the king. "Nothing whatever," said Alice. "That's very important," the king said, turning to the jury. They were just beginning to write this down on their slates, when the White Rabbit interrupted. "Unimportant, your majesty means, of course," he said in a very respectful tone, but frowning and making faces at him as he spoke. "Unimportant, of course, I meant," the king hastily said, and went on to himself in an undertone. "Important, unimportant, unimportant, important," as if he were trying which word sounded best. Some of the jury wrote it down important, and some unimportant. Alice could see this, and she was near enough to look over their slates. But it doesn't matter a bit, she thought to herself. At this moment, the king, who had been for some time busily writing in his notebook, cackled out, "Silence!" and read out from his book, "Rule 42. All persons more than a mile high to leave the court." Everybody looked at Alice. "I'm not a mile high," said Alice. "You are," said the king. "Nearly 2 miles high," added the queen. "Well, I shan't go, at any rate," said Alice. "Besides, that's not a regular rule. You invented it just now." "It's the oldest rule in the book," said the king. "Then it ought to be number 1, said Alice. The king turned pale and shut his notebook hastily. "Consider your verdict," he said to the jury in a low, trembling voice. "There's more evidence yet to come, please, your majesty," said the White Rabbit, jumping up in a great hurry. "This paper has just been picked up." "What's in it?" said the queen. "I haven't opened it yet," said the White Rabbit, "but it seems to be a letter written by the prisoner to somebody." "It must have been that," said the king, "unless it was written to nobody, which isn't usual, you know." "Who's it directed to?" said one of the jurymen. It isn't directed at all, said the White Rabbit. In fact, there's nothing written on the outside. He unfolded the paper as he spoke and added, It isn't a letter, after all. It's a set of verses. Are they in the prisoner's handwriting? Asked another of the jurymen. No, they're not, said the White Rabbit. That's the queerest thing about it. The jury all looked puzzled. He must have imitated somebody else's hand, said the king. The jury all brightened up again. Please, your majesty, I didn't write it, said the knave. And they can't prove I did. There's no name signed at the end. If you didn't sign it, said the king, that only makes the matter worse. You must have meant some mischief, or else you'd have signed your name like an honest man. There was a general clapping of hands at this, and it was the first really clever thing the king had said all that day. That proves his guilt, said the queen. It proves nothing of the sort, said Alice. Why, you don't even know what they're about. Read them, said the king. The White Rabbit put on his spectacles. Where shall I begin, your majesty? He asked. Begin at the beginning, he said gravely, and go on till you come to the end. Then stop. These were the verses the White Rabbit read. They told me you had been to her, and mentioned me to him. She gave me a good character, but said I could not swim. He sent them word I had not gone. We know it to be true. If she should push the matter on, what would become of you? I gave her one, they gave him two. You gave us three or more. They all returned from him to you, though they were mine before. If I or she should chance to be involved in this affair, he trusts to you to set them free, exactly as we were. My notion was that you had been, before she had his fit, an obstacle that came between him and ourselves and it. Don't let them know she liked them best, for this must ever be a secret kept from all the rest between yourself and me. That's the most important piece of evidence we've heard yet, said the king, rubbing his hands. So now let the jury, if any one of them can explain it, said Alice. She had grown so large in the last few minutes that she wasn't a bit afraid of interrupting him. I'll give him 6 pence. I don't believe there's an atom of meaning in it. The jury all wrote down on their slates, She doesn't believe there's an atom of meaning in it, but none of them attempted to explain the paper. If there's no meaning in it, said the king, that saves a world of trouble, you know, as we needn't try to find any. And yet, I don't know, he went on, spreading out the verses on his knee, and looking at them with one eye. I seem to see some meaning in them after all. Said I could not swim. You can't swim, can you? He added, turning to the knave. The knave shook his head sadly. Do I look like it? He said, which he certainly did not, being made entirely of cardboard. All right, so far, said the king, and he went on muttering over the verses to himself. We know it to be true. That's the jury, of course. I gave her 1, they gave him 2. Why, that must be what he did with the tarts, you know. But it goes on, they all returned from him to you, said Alice. Why, there they are, said the king triumphantly, pointing to the tarts on the table. Nothing can be clearer than that. Then again, before she had this fit. You never had any fits, my dear, I think, he said to the queen. Never, said the queen furiously, throwing an inkstand at the lizard as she spoke. The unfortunate little Bill had left off writing on his slate with one finger, as he found it made no mark. But now he hastily began again, using the ink that was trickling down his face, as long as it lasted. Then the words don't fit you, said the king, looking around the court with a smile. There was a dead silence. It's a pun, the king added in an offended tone, and everyone laughed. Let the jury consider their verdict, the king said for about the 20th time that day. No, no, said the queen. Sentence first, verdict afterwards. Stuff and nonsense, said Alice loudly. The idea of having the sentence first. Hold your tongue, said the queen, turning purple. I won't, said Alice. Off with her head, the queen shouted at the top of her voice. Nobody moved. Who cares for you, said Alice. She had grown to her full size by this time. You're nothing but a pack of cards. At this, the whole pack rose up into the air and came flying down upon her. She gave a little scream, half of fright and half of anger, and tried to beat them off, and found herself lying on the bank with her head in the lap of her sister, who was gently brushing away some dead leaves that had fluttered down from the trees upon her face. "Wake up, Alice dear," said her sister. "Why, what a long sleep you've had." "Oh, I've had such a curious dream," said Alice, and she held her sister, and she told her sister, as well as she could remember them, all these strange adventures of hers that you have just been reading about. And when she had finished, her sister kissed her and said, "It was a curious dream, dear, certainly. But now run into your tea. It's getting late." So Alice got up and ran off, thinking while she ran, as well she might, what a wonderful dream it had been. But her sister sat still just as she had left her, leaning her head on her hand, watching the setting sun and thinking of little Alice and all her wonderful adventures, till she too began dreaming after a fashion, and this was her dream. First, she dreamed of little Alice herself, and once again the tiny hands were clasped upon her knee, and the bright, eager eyes were looking up into hers. She could hear the very tones of her voice, and she could see that little queer toss of her head to keep back the wandering hair that would always get into her eyes. And still, as she listened, or seemed to listen, the whole place around her became alive with the strange creatures of her little sister's dream. The long grass rustled at her feet as the white rabbit hurried by. The frightened mouse splashed his way through the neighboring pool. She just heard the rattle of the teacups as the March Hare and his friends shared their never-ending meal, and the shrill voice of the Queen ordering off her unfortunate guest to execution. Once more the pig baby was sneezing at the Duchess's knee, while the plates and dishes crashed around it. Once more the shriek of the griffin and the squeaking of the lizard's slate pencil and the choking of the suppressed guinea pigs filled the air, mixed up with the distant sobs of the miserable mock turtle. So she sat on, with closed eyes, and half believed herself in Wonderland, though she knew she was but to open them again, and all would change to dull reality. The grass would be only rustling in the wind, and the pool rippling to the waving of the reeds. The rattling teacups would change to tinkling sheep bells, and the Queen's shrill cries to be the voice of the shepherd boy, and the sneeze of the baby, the shriek of the griffin, and the other queer noises would change, she knew, to the confused clamor of the busy farmyard, while the lowing of the cattle in the distance would take the place of the mock turtle's heavy sobs. Lastly, she pictured to herself how this same little sister of hers would, in the aftertime, be herself a grown woman, and how she would keep, through all her riper years, the simple and loving heart of her childhood, and how she would gather about her other little children, and make their eyes bright and eager with many a strange tale, perhaps even with the dream of Wonderland of long ago, and how she would feel with all their simple sorrows, and find a pleasure in all their simple joys, remembering her own child life and the happy summer days. The end. Well, that was fun. It was a nice little the climax of the trial, and then Alice just waking up. And we had a all too expected "it was all a dream" moment. But the older sister thinking back and thinking, oh, Alice will remember this dream and carry it on her own stories in her own way to another group of children, which I guess is really just the story coming through. I really did. We settled into it helps getting it done in 2 days, that I can just sort of assign a different voice or characterization to each character as it goes through. The longer sessions and the more complicated dialogues, or less over the top, I should say, are a little bit harder to give proper characters to. But when all the characters are silly, like in Alice in Wonderland, it's easy to be a little extra, right? But yeah, so that was Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, or Alice in Wonderland. Um, as someone had mentioned in yesterday's reading, Through the Looking Glass has kind of more of the lion's share of different adaptations, and a lot of the stories that people are aware of or know of are in the latter book. So we'll have to revisit this at some point and do the Through the Looking Glass to really see more. But for now, we'll call a wraps on this and move on to another project from tomorrow. But yeah, the song number, had fun with the mocking turtle singing, and really all of the poems and bits kind of get a rhythm to it and fall into a different sort of cadence. It's a lot of fun. I definitely find as I'm getting more comfortable with reading, whether it be as we go further into the different books or get more comfortable within a specific book, I can emote quite a lot more. So tonight I had a lot of fun with all the different back and forth going on. The griffin and the mock turtle were fun to put out, and especially the mock turtle was kind of an easier voice to roll through. Yeah, I did find myself roped into some karaoke last night over Discord, so that was entertaining. Channel the inner show, or channel the show tunes, and bring out the old chorus kid or theater kid. Everybody else singing K-pop and various other pop songs, and I show up with things older than even myself. But that's always fun, right? Gotta belt it out every once in a while. But it was good, wasn't it? Eh? I will never turn down a chance to sing a little bit of Phantom. Especially after I've knocked a few back. It's certainly easier to get into. Yeah. That's my biggest issue is the Discord mic and sound cancellation is a little bit more, shall we say, aggressive than OBS's just direct audio translation. So I get I get nerfed by Discord every once in a while. I'm told the held notes don't take it, which works out pretty well because I don't have the chops I used to. So for the very long held notes, if Discord cuts it off, I can kind of just stop, you know. That is also true. Like, could do something more modern, could do something from like High School Musical, or do something from, well, even that's jading me, isn't it? Could do something from like Wicked or something of the like, but Phantom is where it's at. Come on. Come on. I think last time I did something from Les Mis, which also dates me pretty well, doesn't it? But hey, I do a good Javert. That's something we might read some of those down the line. But plays are hard. But I guess the original Les Mis wasn't a play; it was a book. Yeah, that sucks. It's sometimes when you try and just belt it out like that, it does actually hurt you over time. I've been lucky to keep most of my range and things, but it's sometimes life is a little hard on the pipes. I don't know. I've been rather blessed to never take up smoking or the like, which certainly helps preserve a lot of that. The drinking hasn't caught up to me yet on it, so I'm not such a heavy drinker that it'll hurt the voice a lot. So, and getting into this is kind of our narrations as we read through these is good to sort of restore a lot of my old voice. For a very long time, I could find myself going entire days without saying more than 2 sentences. You know how it gets if you're just working, you keep your nose to the grindstone, and not really calling anybody, so you just kind of mind your own business. And then sometimes the only thing you find yourself saying in a day is your order at Starbucks. And sometimes not even that if you put it on the phone. So forcing myself to speak a lot more is getting us back into proper form. Oh, yeah. Vocalist and punk band will screw you up some. That's between that and like a metal growl, that'll screw up your chops forever. Apparently there's a certain way, there's a method to it with the metal scream that will actually not hurt your voice at all. It's sort of a more throaty, guttural thing than actually using the vocal cords, but I have not gotten the trick for that. And yeah, there's always a lot to be said for doing like some band work and some just being involved in a hobby that you like. Whether you're trying to pursue it as a project or a career or anything, but just doing something for the love of it. It doesn't matter so much sometimes if there's consequences about it, like whether it's long-term harms, because sometimes you just gotta do what sounds like fun, right? I realize that is probably terrible advice, but you know what? You gotta live a little, right? Alright, I do need to do some housekeeping here. My reader actually limits us to 20 books, so I do need to migrate things out. Yes, I feel you there. You get through and you're just like, man, I kind of expected to punch out at like 35, but life keeps going on, doesn't it? Alright, move this over into the finished books. Yeah, who let this happen? What? My knees? Why do my knees hurt? What happened to my back? Oh no. Ah, well. It's always a little bit of, there's always fun to be had even as we find ourselves in unexpected old age. The benefits of being able to happily complain and yell at clouds and tell kids to get off our lawns. Hey. Yeah, poor career choices will do a lot, won't it? Man, I have got a story of things I've done and scars to tell the tale. Took a stint as a sushi chef and got the knife scars on my hands to prove it, and oh man, you gotta be able to call Thoreau names. If you can't laugh at Thoreau, you're doing something wrong. Something about some pretentious little asshole coming through. You gotta be able to take the piss out of him. Otherwise, you're just taking yourself way too seriously. That's all that is. But yeah, I think everybody's got their own share of poor career choices or a storied history of their own. Whether it be, I did a carny. That's a cool one. I've been a preschool teacher. I built military grade Humvees. I've been a sushi chef, but I've never been a carny. So that could be, actually probably it was a lot less fun than you might imagine. There's probably a lot of romance to it, but a lot of actual hard work that goes behind the scenes that you don't hear about. And probably what brings you into the more aches and pains than you might imagine. Alright, so I think we probably should consider what we want to read next. Ooh, sous chef is nice. That is also, working in the kitchen, back of house, is a ton of work. Absolute monstrous amount of work. So I've got mad respect for anybody that can pull that off on a regular basis, because it is something else. You've got between the madcap pace going on, where there's between the customers and just the other workers back there, and the environment. Sometimes you're dealing with fire right in your face. You're dealing with ice cold as you're running back to the fridge or the freezers. You're dealing with the mandolins that are like a constant threat to your fingertips. It's Working in a kitchen is hard work, and I will always have a great deal of respect for that. That's nice. That's one of the you do pick up skills as you go through various occupations over the years. Um, and I don't cook nearly as much as I should, or as I like to, but when I do, it's a lot of fun. I'm decent at it, but it's one of those you're just like, if you don't have anybody to cook for, do you even bother cooking, you know? And cooking just for yourself is fine, but sometimes it's more expensive than just picking something up. So I try and make a big commotion or a hubbub to actually cook something every once in a while. I've got a few recipes that I go back to on the regular that are a lot of fun to do and I enjoy a lot, but they're probably, well, they're definitely an expensive recipe, which doesn't justify their doing more than once every a couple times a year at the tops, just for special occasions. But I'll always go back to comfort food. I've got a nice stroganoff recipe that I go back to every once in a while, and it helps. See, that helps. Yeah, having a couple people around to enjoy the cooking, or take part in the cooking process, or just to sit back and enjoy as they enjoy the food, makes it a lot more satisfying. So that can help a lot. Um, I've just got me and the cats around, and yeah, stroganoff is great. Oh man, I I've got a whole family recipe for it that's probably pretty simple, but man, it is such a comfort food. It's especially like I've got the old handwritten recipe for it that I think my dad or grandmother put together that calls for like day old steak. So like you do steak for one day and then you use the leftovers for the stroganoff the next day. I've never actually done it that way because I just buy the meat straight for it, but whew, it's kind of high. Well, it's definitely like high cholesterol and stuff. So like it's not good for you by any stretch of the imagination, but it is very good. I'm always a sucker for egg noodles or anything you put on it too. Oh, that's awful. I got lucky through. I think I only had COVID once, and I didn't come away with anything lasting. No long COVID or anything. Just I had gotten it after I had gotten vaccinated, so it was really just a bit of a flu. So that was lucky on my part. But between sour cream tasting like soap, that would wreck it, and that brings me on to people that think or that have the soap taste for cilantro. Oh, I can't imagine. Oh, that was the rough part about the whole COVID situation. Is you could do everything right. You could do you could go out masked. You could get the vaccinations. You could do like you could be responsible, but if you just got unlucky, you got a harder case than expected, or just it's just a luck of the draw. That was a lot of what was scary about that time was that you could be doing everything the right way and still come away with lasting repercussions. And that was I can't say that we're really behind it because I think we're stuck with COVID forever, but yeah. And yeah, if you got stuck with, oh man, I can't imagine if like like a Mexican with the gene for cilantro. Oh, that'd just be like a family shame. Or I guess you just deal with it and learn to like soap. And yeah, it is endemic now. It's with us forever, which means get your boosters on the rate every year. Get your flu shot, get your COVID shot, because it may not prevent it entirely. It does a long way to prevention, but it also reduces the severity. And so you gotta make whatever mark you can to stack the odds in your favor. Because as we all know, as we get older, risk mitigation is really what life's all about. That's how we got to be old. Well, shit, maybe that's the problem. Alright, so we should probably think about what we want to read next, because we don't have a whole lot of time now because we've got tomorrow. Actually, you know what? I think tomorrow would be a great day. Let me see how long this is. We can go back to Lovecraft tomorrow and get some of these short stories out of the way, because my reader has a limit on how many books I can have in there without paying for the reader, and I'm far too cheap for that. So I just generally cycle things. And when I loaded up all of Lovecraft in there, it definitely did a number on my limit. So let's take a look. And I think we can either do 2 of the short stories, or we can do The Mountains of Madness, which is one of the better ones. I'm told that is kind of the hallmark. So that's kind of our options there. We can knock some of these out and also just have a good time of it. Switch back to the unknown and unknowable, the creepy and the weird. Kind of get us back on that. We've gone from the whimsical to the heinous. So yeah, let's go ahead and do that tomorrow. I'll scope out a couple of them to see which ones are about the right length, and we'll go from there. Oh wow, this one actually is on the cover. It's got Poe, and that's just bringing a whole lot of ideas forward. Yeah, I'm super excited for as we get into things that are more seasonal too, because as we pull into the fall, we've got a lot more horror style. We can go to the classic monster stories. We can do like Bram Stoker. We can do Frankenstein. We've got so many options as we get into the seasonal stuff, and we can do those anytime, really. But it just feels like such a waste not to make a big event out of doing like classic Monster October or something of the like, you know? I guess I should plan ahead and see how long things are and how long they'll take. But we definitely need to do one of the classics for the classic horror stories in October. And then that brings us to things in the Christmas season as well. There's stories that we can do in November and December that'll be a lot of fun. Actually got to see if we can get things that are timely. I guess there's like Christmas Carol, but man, Dickens is so dense. Ugh, it's so dense. But yeah, as we're going on more and more in this, it's really sticking, and we're having a fun time between the readings and the yapping after, and building things up. We can start planning to the future, because I'm definitely in this for the long haul. I'm having a lot of fun, and even if people drop off, I'll still be doing these readings because it's in the VODs. It's there for future, and I like to read. That's what I do. That's why I've mentioned on Bluesky. I'm turning a old hobby into a habit. I'm trying to be productive. So we're turning my reading into subjecting you all to my misery together as I find French. Even Alice in Wonderland had French. I can't get away from it. Oh, man. All right, guys. Well, we are winding down. We've been yapping for, probably 20 minutes now. So let's go ahead and call this a wrap for tonight. We've got, we'll start up some Lovecraft tomorrow, do something weird and wild as we chew through a little bit of the backlog, and then that'll cue us up for something new. Whether we'll either start that on Tuesday, or if we want to do another short story on Tuesday just to string things along. We'll see. We've got some options, and I want to try and stick to our schedule as best as we can, just to have that stability. I don't think we've missed more than 2 or 3 days since we started this, and that's actually quite an accomplishment, if I say for myself. I know a lot of streamers and VTubers out there have a lot of trouble with scheduling because it's a hobby. It's something people just do, and I understand it. But I will do my best to be considerate and constant. We can have a little bit of regularity around here. Man, I'm old. All right, guys. So we're going to wrap up for tonight. We finished Alice in Wonderland. It was a nice bit of departure from the heavier tones and stories and themes that we've had recently. A bit of whimsy, but also not entirely innocent. Alice was, yes, a child, but there is little truly as cruel as a child sometimes. So, there's that. So, we'll wrap up for tonight, and we'll see a different kind of mystery and whimsy as we return tomorrow to some of the weird and wild from Lovecraft. Thank you very much, everyone. I hope you have a wonderful night. If you haven't yet, I do ask that if you'd be so kind, drop a like on the stream. We are trying to grow our community here, and the metrics and analytics that come through and the god that is the algorithm do care about the likes, and it directs people toward the streams and towards the channel as we find more. So, as always, I would love to just spread our little community a little bit further and just enjoy the books together. And so, if you could, drop a like. And if you already have, thanks! Alright, we'll go ahead and wrap up for tonight, and I will see you guys tomorrow, and we will find something that may be better not said. Alright, have a great night, everyone. Thanks.